published my research under his name, blocked me from every academic position I applied for. And then, 6 years later, he sat in the front row of my TED Talk and tried to introduce himself to me in the green room as my biggest influence. I let him finish. I waited until he had said everything he wanted to say. And then I said 13 words that ended his evening, and from what I heard, a significant portion of his professional credibility. I'm going to tell you exactly what those 13 words were. But first, I need to tell you the full story, because you need to understand what he took, and what it cost me to build something from nothing after he tried to make sure I never would. My name is Dr. Alina Chen. I am a behavioral economist. My work focuses on how social dynamics influence economic decision-making in low-income communities. And I was a doctoral student. My supervisor, I'll call him Professor Harwick, was considered a leading voice in my field, published widely, quoted frequently. The kind of academic whose approval could open every door you needed. I was 25 and working on what I believed was genuinely important research, a longitudinal study of cooperative financial behavior in 3 specific community contexts. It took me 2 years of fieldwork, thousands of hours of interviews, and a methodological framework that I built almost entirely from scratch. I shared everything with Professor Harwick, as doctoral students do. He was my supervisor. The expectation was collaboration, mentorship, appropriate academic credit. What I got instead was a published paper. His name alone, no co-authorship, no acknowledgement that presented my methodology, my fieldwork findings, and significant portions of my analytical framework as his original work. He published it while I was presenting a conference paper in another city. By the time I came back, it was done. When I confronted him, he told me that as my supervisor, he had rights over the collaborative research produced during my doctoral studies. Cited university policy in ways that were technically arguable and practically devastating. I escalated. I went to the university's research integrity office. The process took 8 months, at the end of which they found insufficient evidence of deliberate misappropriation, a finding that I believe was influenced heavily by Professor Harwick's status within the institution. And then the doors started closing. I applied for 4 faculty positions. All 4 came back negative. I later found out from a colleague who heard it directly that Harwick had been contacted as a reference for 2 of them, despite the fact that he was not on my reference list, and had described my work as derivative and my attitude toward collaboration as problematic. I applied for research grants. Declined. I was 3 years out of my doctorate with no academic position, no institutional affiliation, and a reputation that had been quietly poisoned by the person who was supposed to protect it. I moved back in with my parents at 30. I want you to sit with that for a moment. I had a PhD, years of original research, and I was sleeping in my childhood bedroom because I couldn't find work in the field I had dedicated my professional life to. My mother, who is a deeply practical woman, said something to me one evening that I have thought about many times since. She said, "Alina, the academy has rejected you. So what? Build outside it." I started writing publicly. A blog initially, accessible explanations of behavioral economics concepts with original observations drawn from my research. The audience was small at first, and then it wasn't. My work resonated with people in development organizations, social enterprises, NGOs, and policy institutes, people who were trying to solve real problems and who found academic literature useful but distant. I was invited to consult, then to speak, then to advise. I wrote a book, self-published initially, then picked up by a mainstream press after it started selling on its own merits. The book was reviewed well. It was translated into 7 languages. It was cited in policy documents in 3 countries. I received an invitation to give a TED Talk. I accepted. I did not know until 2 days before the event that Professor Harwick had also been invited to attend as a featured guest. The conference theme had included academic luminaries in adjacent fields. When I found out, I thought about it for one night. And then I decided to do nothing differently. I would give the talk I had prepared. I would be exactly who I was. The talk went well. Extremely well. The response in the room was one of those moments that you spend your career hoping for, people genuinely moved, genuinely engaged. I came off stage into the green room where a number of guests and speakers were gathered. Professor Harwick approached me within minutes. He was older than I remembered, more careful in his movements. He introduced himself, which struck me since he knew perfectly well that I knew who he was, and said he had watched my talk with great admiration. Said he had always known I would do important work. He said he considered himself in many ways my biggest influence. I let him finish, all of it. I waited until he had said the last word, and then I said clearly and conversationally so that the people immediately around us could hear, "You published my research without my name on it." 13 words. The green room had a particular quality of silence that I have not experienced before or since. He began to speak. I continued still conversationally. "I'm not going to have this conversation with you tonight. Tonight is not about that. But I wanted you to know that I know you know, and based on what I see around us, now some other people know too." I excused myself. I went to find a glass of water. 3 people in that green room were senior figures in academic and research institutions. I do not know exactly what conversations happened afterward. But in the months that followed, I received several pieces of information suggesting that Professor Harwick's reputation in certain circles had become significantly more complicated. I have an academic affiliation now, a visiting fellowship at a research institution that operates outside traditional university structures. My book is in its third printing. I consult globally. I speak regularly. The original research that was taken from me has been cited by others properly in my name many times over in the years since I began publishing publicly. I have not formally pursued legal action against Professor Harwick. The statute of limitations, the complexity of academic IP law, and the emotional cost of that process have all contributed to that decision. But I have also not been quiet. I have written carefully and factually about the experience of research appropriation in academia. I have advocated for stronger institutional protections for junior researchers. I have mentored dozens of doctoral students and made very clear to all of them, document everything, know your rights, and do not assume that status protects honesty. Is it enough? I don't know. I live with that uncertainty. What I know is that the work I have built is mine. Completely, undeniably, documentably mine, and the work speaks. What Professor Harwick did to me was a specific kind of theft, the theft of intellectual identity. He tried to take not just my research but my name as a researcher, and what I learned, painfully and slowly and through many nights of genuine despair, is that intellectual identity cannot actually be stolen, not permanently, because the mind that produced the work produces more. It keeps going. It finds other paths. Could block my institutional access. He could not block my mind. Build outside the walls when the walls are closed to you. Build publicly when the institutions won't acknowledge you privately. The audience is larger than any institution. The impact can be greater than any academic journal. And document everything. Please document everything. Time-stamped, backed up, witnessed where possible. Not out of paranoia, but out of the simple recognition that the world does not always work fairly and preparation is not the same as pessimism. Thank you for watching Digital Confessions. This one was personal for me to share. If it meant something to you, please subscribe, like, and share it with someone in academia or in any field where intellectual theft happens. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone take credit for something you built? What did you do? See you next week.